gang of boys threw stones out at sea. They were at the beach, and the waves came in and out. Lost boys looking for a girl friend, and in frustration they idled and threw stones out at sea. A ship lay in the distance, heading for the harbour, and that ship on the horizon was like it was a luxury boat, and you could see the windows, there's loads of windows there and people out on deck, and these guys lived a kind of affluent lifestyle, and they were heading toward their shore. And the boys changed by day, and they hung as a group, and they grew up from humble beginnings, and they learned to embrace abundance and affluence as part of their natural heritage. But this didn't mean that they were necessarily wanting to be rich, but they created a razzmatazz. They started to paint things, write novels, write poetry, write music, which is like in accordance with their spirit. And they studied each day, and their spiritual studies of scripture lightened their minds as they simplified their lives, and they came out of a pristine purity, and they applied the pure beauty to the canvas or to the sheet, and they envisioned, heavenly ideals, and wrote about grace, gratitude, friendship, and they conceived of a life that took them outside of their immediate trappings. And although they longed for those things on that boat, they realised that the island they were on, the beach they were on, they had everything, all the resources they needed, and they wanted to make their city further inland a great city. And they believed in the idea that they happened to things, not things happened to them. They were movers and shakers, and so they were like inspired. And the guys on the boat were one group of people who had similar ideals, and he had no problem with those guys on the boat. But soon enough they launched out with their boat too, going for trips, and the wooden floor was a kind of new reality, a symbol of their journeying out to a new world, a new realm, a new vista. So they saw going out to sea as being a group exercise in which they could let go of the past, and when they undertook those journeys they brought they just relaxed and let the weight go off their minds. and you know, some of them were smoking cigarettes, some of them were, no, that actually they used to smoke, but they replaced that with the fire, and they they ate naturally. They went sort of berry picking, cherry picking, and they created organic produce. They got a piece of land and they grew things that were free from preservatives and artificial things, and as they ate properly, their minds became clearer and they became more and more content and at peace. And in that peace and simplicity, they began to reach into their inner feelings to discover what it is they really wanted and what Spirit was really trying to tell them to do. And they found guidance, and they all matured in their own way, and each of them understood the Tao, which is the nature of all things, which is the water, and they became individualized even as they were in a group, and each attained to the perfection, the ultimate, within their respective levels, and they each grew individualized and a perfect expression of their authentic self. And yet they had this group affinity. So they went on this boat trip, and they used it as an exercise to relinquish the memory which spanned lands, and the lands of the psyche, which they seeded with new visions, and they re-understood their past, and they saw the past as a glorious history, as man's great achievements were acknowledged, and they saw that the past behind them was something of great grandeur, of virtue, where various ideas were developed, what constituted loyalty, what constituted trust, etc., honour, etc., etc. And they contemplated while they were in the boat to escape the pressures of their urban lives, and they grew up with sort of toxic foods and toxic chemicals, and their attention spans were like very short before, and they were, you know, wired to technology, and they used to sit wide like a bunch of, like, all these heads bowed down in these internet cafes where they used to access the internet together sometimes, and it was like they were attached to these electrical cables, and it's like man was in the hands of artificial intelligence, and they pored over these screens for hours on end. But they realised that a laptop was something that was very useful, which they could carry with them, and they didn't need to be in these internet cafes. So they had a laptop with them, which was like a notebook, and they recorded their visions. And what happened was they stopped eating junk food, as it was called, and they changed from having sodas to having sort of smoothies, juices, natural fruits, and sometimes they'd make things from excuse me, from for the stuff they grew, and they grew everything from tomatoes, vegetables, and you know, they enjoyed collecting seeds from different parts of the world, and those things that were compatible with growth in this country, in the country they were in, they bought those, and they created this beautiful garden, and it had it was utilitarian, you know, it fed people to some degree, just because, not so much because they were, I mean, they weren't subsistence farmers, they were more sort of abundance farmers, and so sometimes they cooked meals, outdoor meals, like barbecues and stuff from outdoors in their garden, and they'd eat stuff from you know, the soil, Mother Nature, whatever. And so they did that, and they ate sort of pumpkins, and they didn't celebrate Halloween, but they enjoyed pumpkin pie. And they gave up all the toxic things that they used to do, you know, and they used to, like, one of them used to just went online so much that his attention span was no more than sort of 3 seconds, and he felt that he was reading these characters on Twitter, and it was only 140 characters, and as time went by he felt that his attention span was getting more and more distracted, more and more less and less, and he attributed this to the nature of Facebook and Twitter. He felt that because you're darting around the place looking at everyone's different profiles, it reminded him of the porno sites, which he and his friends really couldn't bear the sight of. But it had these pictures, and once one person saw one picture, they'd see other ones, and in a frenzy of greed they'd just click through all of them, and he felt that people were surfing in that way, and they had relentless sort of greeds and infinite sort of wants and desires, and he felt that surfing in that way was kind of wrong, and he preferred to go out and engage in being with the natural elements, going to the park, having his energies balanced out by nature, and he also, that, you know, they also kind of you know, created things from the wood, and they even built a tree house for some kids, and some green for the kids to play on, away from the influence of technology sometimes. And yeah, so there's one guy, he was on Twitter and all that, and he felt that he was becoming more and more distracted, and the electricity from the plug sockets and stuff, he couldn't sleep at night. It was kind of uncomfortable, sensitive to the electric. So and the office he used to work with, he used to leave the plug sockets on, and it's just full of sort of, there's no sort of feng shui about the place, and he couldn't give a damn about these things. But he actually felt that when his friend asked him to put some plants in there and soften up the place with sort of good paintings which emitted a good vibe into the place, and plants and little bonsai trees and sort of roses and all manner of lush and, you know, beautiful natural things. they were put into the office, and people were encouraged to sort of, you know, just breathe, you know, and their productivity sort of grew exponentially. It was like the Google sort of work area where they have 3 days of work and then 2 days they come in to just play around, and they find that playing around and working on things that they enjoy, their own projects, you know, that spirit of play was conducive to most sort of creativity and invention. So they create that kind of environment there as well. And you know, you got a book, Drive, by whatever his name was. We'll get back on that. But he says motivation is created by the things that you're enthused by. It's no longer the militant kind of motivation of time's old. It's, you know, there is that kind of parabola of evolution, but for other people you can kind of tap into this creativity vibe, which, you know, is endless if you just align yourself with the idea that you can create things every day. And so they were like, I don't know if you've seen the Yellow Pages advert, where the guy is in his room, he's got internet connection, and then bit by bit he's in an empty room and he clicks through. No, he doesn't use the internet, he uses Yellow Pages, and he rings up various people. He just has a phone, and he gets, you know, paintings in. He gets classical instruments inside his house. He gets excuse me. He gets sort of 19th century literature into his house, and so on. And he builds up this space which originally was just an empty space. Now these guys are not interested in accumulation. They kind of allow things to pass through, and they believe that they don't own anything, and so they use things and then they pass them on. So, and they had this rule that they wouldn't kind of hold on to anything too much, because they felt that if you put stuff in a spotless room, it kind of builds up a sort of emotion, and when you become too attached to things, these things begin to own you, as it said in sort of Fight Club. And so they believed in weight loss for the mind, and symbolically they'd take things that they were discarding for that month, which they might have needed up to that point for maybe a few months. It differs from person to person, obviously, but they'd have this little ritual for themselves, you know. They're just like friends, there's nothing other than that, and they'd just throw out the stuff they had, or they'd either throw it out to sea, symbolising the lightening of the load in their life, of getting rid of the cargo and sailing more smoothly, steering through life. Or sometimes they just sort of left their stuff, left their wares out on the street, and people just picked that up, and they felt that through being magnanimous with your stuff, they felt that that was just an open-hearted way to live, and that we all sort of, his things are my things are his things, kind of felt that they got a circulation going. And they also had believed in good sort of bodily blood circulation, and so they did sort of qigong, and that as they circulated the light around their friends and family, and they also circulated the qi inside themselves, energy mechanism. So then they had this water, they had this water, and you know, it was the Tao for them. It was simplicity, and in the end all you hear is the sound of water. with nothing kept. And in order to go through life, you've got to flow. And so these people sort of had flow, and they believed in flow, which is to capturing flow in one's daily life is when you have focus and you're absorbed every day in certain activities, and it gives you sort of this momentum over time. And so staying in flow was what they did. They learned from nature. They walked by the banks of the Tao, and they lived in simplicity. But then conversely, they had change of locations, and they had variety in life and change, but it was all in this easy flow. And there was every kind of temperament in this group. One kind of go-getter guy, one kind of more mellow guy, but they all understood the softness of the Tao that allows things to naturally build. And so none of them got too emotionally caught up in sort of showing off the currency of the ego, glamour, glitz, rah-rah, acting big. But they were these silently composed individuals who had inner power, and they could manifest things that they needed. Although the irony was they were content with their lot in life, their station in life, but they just seemed to attract things, and they just paid a little attention to what they think they might like and what they might enjoy, and they undertook those things with no real strong emotional attachment. It didn't matter either way, but since they were on this earth plane, they just did what they did, and they managed to create sort of great things between them. And it was like a renaissance of the ancient learning which he had seen, which one of the guys, the captain and the crew if you like, he sort of saw how it was all done by one of the elders who had left the ship to him, and he felt like he had to drive it forward in his own life, just to carry the teachings forward. And so he embodied these principles as much as he could. He learnt from many, and in a different town he'd know a different person. He'd make these visits to see them, and he'd like to drink tea with them, and in a kind of atoms for peace kind of way. And there was mad stuff going on in the world, and some people were growing psychologically sort of discontent, and they were finding anguish in their lives. But he went with his intuition, and he created good things, him and his crew, and these gave people hope. And he also was paving a road for people in the future. So after him, people could apply and learn the same things, because what he was learning he was essentially a kind of philosopher, a kind of sage, and he was a entrepreneur. So he was there and they were on the boat, and they sort of he mingled with those guys on the other boat sometimes. Went to their houses. He had these tea. He liked to have tea with people because it was like peace, like we said. And there was a special place they liked to go to, where like some of the top peeps go. It's like $50 for a pot of tea. He went there because he believed in these sacred spaces for a long time, and he felt that when people gathered together in the ambience of like peace, you created peace in that area. And they say that Jesus' atoms still permeate sort of where he treaded, and you had the Buddha's trail and so on. And Deepak Chopra talks about Jesus leaving his trail, and so they felt an affinity with the air and the natural elements, and they felt that where they created their presence, they believed in sort of the energy, the presence, and people are drawn to them because they had a lot of energy. So it was they understood the secret that you just work on yourself and you raise your energy, and people are drawn to you. And so naturally they were high energy people from the beginning, real kind of adepts or initiates, and so they were just like a regular bunch of people, like a group of friends, like we said. So they went to this place sometimes, and they'd go to these different sacred spots, because these different sacred spots obviously had that ambience, and it aligned them with Mother Earth, and you can call her Gaia if you like. And by going to those places, they felt that these places were good in an otherwise depraved, corrupt world. And what the guy saw around him sort of really, it hurt him, and it made him strive for these ideals that he had in his spirit. And he knew that chivalry and honour and all these things were aligned with the imagination, and it was something internal. And so he didn't care about trappings of a lifestyle or whatever, but he believed in that inward beauty of the imagination, the beauty of virtue, the beauty of principle, and he tried his best to live in accordance with that. And so he was antagonized greatly by forces outside of himself, but he stayed true to his ideals, and he stayed true to his heart. And however unorthodox his likings were at times, he just went with it. And he used to spend a lot of time sort of talking to people, and he genuinely wanted the best for people around him. But people always sort of took him for a ride, and so he went on his own journey. Because people were always taking him for a ride, and when he was younger, he was never in the driver's seat, and so he learned to take the helm. Yeah, people sort of laughed at this guy. He didn't mind, because he realised that it had to be that way. But he developed his own vision for life, and he was deeply aggrieved when his previous master in a Western practice, from a Westerner, had sort of kicked the bucket, I should say. So he was left on his own to sort of lead his own life, because previously, he, as much as he has this sense of other people appreciating their paths, he had his own, and so he walked his path in the spirit of his old teacher, but he also had a current teacher as well who guided him in his path. And there was like a thunderstorm in heaven, and he saw people flailing about, some people getting really lost, getting submerged in the sea of their own emotional disquiet. And he saw people sort of beginning to sort of self-harm. There are a lot of people who were getting very lost and not having a sense of right or having any kind of map. So then, you know, he felt that he had his map. That came to him bit by bit, a bit like the Colin Wright article we really enjoyed, which says, you know, on the path there's lots of little mini trails, little brooks that you can walk past, and little precipices and so forth. It's not just a path, but I believe that we're paving a road essentially, and we shouldn't take too many detours on our path. But you know, the ship left a trail in the water, and it hummed along. He felt it was symbolic on a lot of levels for them to take these rides. They did other things, like they sort of hung out on the beach, and they built a campfire on the beach one night, and as the flames were burning, they spoke about what they were, their convictions in life, and their passions, and they talked about their creativity as the fire burned, and there was a perfect harmony in the setting, because you had the water, the fluidity of their characters and the changeability of life, and the rushing waves and the different rhythms of life, daily life, daily habits, different rituals, whatever that people do. The fire and wood. The wood was the thing on which the fire burned, and the wood was their project, and so they had this thing where they chopped wood for a day, not a day, for a few hours, and they piled it all together, lit a fire for the night to keep them warm, and they cooked food. They cooked sort of food, fish if you like, or meat over the fire, and it was like a testament to the creative fires of, you know, the creativity, that spirit, like that Duffer, if you like, or the great law, if you like, of the universe gave to them, and they were like shining lights in their areas. They tried to harpoon him with their critics, spearheading campaigns and stuff, but he just sometimes away from his group he just surfed with his surfing board that had a smooth front that moved forward, and it was a symbol of moving forward without having to spike people, and so he just rode the waves and the changing altitudes through surfing, come back and have sort of ice cream with a girl, girlfriend, friend, whatever, and then there was much animosity shown towards him, and some really sort of troubled people sort of began to hate him and became obsessed with him, and he did his best to just mind his own business and get on with what he had to do. But there was one woman who was in tears all the time, and she hated his life, but he didn't understand how, and it was an elder, he didn't understand how an elder would ever envy the children, and this disturbed him, but he thought elders were for guidance for the map. But they instead were doing things that sort of disappointed him. And his father used to be a man of, okay, he had his flaws, but he was always a man of his words, and he assumed a father-like figure because he was the head of the household and he was like a man should be. Anyway, so they wandered up at the stars, wondering about the multidimensional universe, and they meditated on the beach sometimes. That's early sunrise, and at night they looked upon the stars, had like a telescope, and the trees, they revered trees a lot because the sturdiness of them and how one nut can become an oak, and but also oak is in that nut already. So that's it.